Hi, I'm Adam and welcome back to First Man Photography, and today's video is very simple. It's about the wonder of landscape photography, and if you are not already, why you should be doing it. Before we get going today though, this video is sponsored by Squarespace. If you need a domain name, a website, or an online store, make your next move with Squarespace. At the start of this video, I want to share two things with you because we live in very uncertain times and it feels like having the rug pulled from under our feet could happen again at any time. For me, it's important to maintain a perspective, and one way I do this, especially at New Year, is to look back on the previous year and reflect. Even when it's difficult, or especially when it's difficult, it's quite likely that we achieved and learned a lot. I released my first book this year, and I'm not really sure how I did it, but somehow made it happen, and I'm very proud of it, and I think it's actually something very different from your normal photo book. The second thing, or number two, is to look ahead. Now, this time of year, it's likely you will be fed a load of hocus pocus well-being bullshit. Much of it is worth ignoring, but for me, it's very simple. Fill your life with meaning and fulfillment, and ultimately that will make us happy. It's much easier said than done though. One way to achieve this is to be busy, do more things, take risks, and be creative. For me, this is absolutely the wonder of landscape photography and why so many people love it. So in this video, I want to take you on a journey across a range of landscapes to both reflect on what came before, but also to inspire you for the year ahead. A few of you will have seen some of this already, but the algorithm does very little to help me out, so I'm pretty confident there is something in here for everyone. Also, if you like the video, please press that like button as gently as possible and also subscribe. But smash that bell icon as hard as you can because that's what you do with bells. Right, let's head out and about and start with a reminder of a powerful way we can make great compositions. Right, so I am pretty much set up for a shot, and tip number one, most definitely, is about location. Now, finding locations for landscape photography can be challenging. And my advice when you are trying to shake off the rust is, one, is to go somewhere that you know, and two, is to go somewhere that has a really nice viewpoint. And that's exactly what I have done today. Just look at that fabulous scene down there. Absolutely stunning. I am just thrilled with how it's looking. I will talk you through the shot in a minute, but I think when we're trying to shake the rust off, and this is what I did the other day, is just get back to basics. And one of the most basic things, particularly when it comes to finding a composition, is using the rule of thirds. Now, I've talked about it quite recently in the studio, but the rule of thirds is not a cliche. You could shoot the rule of thirds for the rest of your life and probably no one would notice, and you still have the ability to get unique shots and shots that look very, very different. The attitude towards the rule of thirds is a bit silly sometimes, and we need to just forget it. We're not worried about what anyone else thinks. And anyway, it's not cliche. It might be better if we maybe see it as a guideline rather than a rule. But how do we actually use it? Sometimes that doesn't necessarily get talked about. I talk about it at much more length in the masterclass, which you can get a 7-day free trial of if you join the Raw Room. I'll put links down below, and it's kind of a much bigger extension of what we're talking about today. But if I bring the video up on the camera so I can show you what I'm talking about, composing a shot at a viewpoint like this, when you first begin photography, or if you're just getting back into it after a break, often the inclination is just to put the horizon line right down the center of the image. We don't want to do that, particularly in this case. So here I am at about 24 millimeters, and that's allowing me to get both the cliff in and then the lake down there. But if I just tilt the camera down and put that horizon line onto the rule of thirds, it just instantly makes it a more interesting image. And as you can see, at the bottom left-hand corner of the image, because another tip is to always check around the edge of your frame. But if we now look at that bottom left-hand corner of that image, those trees and that grass with that golden light on them just look absolutely stunning. So beautiful. And that's going to really pull our attention into the image, especially if I maybe use a little bit of a gradient to darken the immediate corner off, and then it just draws us into the image and then into this scene with that lake and that cliff. So particularly with the lake and the cliff, with the rule of thirds, we want to put areas of interest on the lines, but also specifically on those cross sections. So in this case, I'm trying to get that lake and that cliff as close as possible to the rule of thirds. Now, unfortunately, it's not possible, but by putting the lake close to the bottom right-hand point and the cliff a bit closer to the top left, that is also going to ensure that this image is nicely balanced. So I guess essentially I'm using those points as a reference point to allow me to get this image nice and balanced. The trees are still, I suppose a few of them are starting to bud, but there isn't a huge amount of colour in it. But with that light, where we're now just getting into the golden hour, just looks fantastic. And it's making those cliffs look golden, as well as this straw-like grass down here, which I just absolutely love. So the composition is quite straightforward. I've got the lake there, like I said, the cliff, that hill in the distance, and then the really interesting clouds, particularly the ones just above the horizon. It gets a bit more dull, these ones here closer to me, but they're not going to be in the shot. I'm pretty much ready to shoot that. Let's just wait for a nice moment with the clouds. I'm at f11 to get everything in focus. I've focused on one of the trees not too far in front of me here. I'm at ISO 100. Nice clean image. Manual mode, obviously, always with landscape photography. I've got the 2-second timer on. I'm at 1/40th of a second. I'm ready to shoot, and then I'm just gonna block the sun from the front of the camera so I don't get any flare in there. Let's take a look at that. Oh, that bottom left-hand corner just looks so good, drawing us into the image there. Very straightforward use of the rule of thirds there has resulted in a really nice image. Use your compositional rules, but use them as guidelines. Feel free to break them if you want, but they are there as a tool, so use them. And the rule of thirds is the easiest one to fall back on to help you make good pictures. Haha, yes, I love that. Really happy. Right, we'll be back out and about in a minute, but as you know, this video is sponsored by Squarespace, and Squarespace is just the best place for photographers to build and make their website. And what a better way to kick off 2022 than building a website to promote your business or your photography or anything else you want to share with the world. The reason I love it is it's just so easy. You can use one of their beautiful templates, and within a few seconds you can have an up and running website, and you just drag your images into it and put a bit of your text on there, and you're going to have a unique and beautiful website that works on all your different devices without any technical knowledge. I've been using them for years. They've got great customer service, and if you want to, you can then upgrade your website to an online store, and that is just as easy to do. The great thing is as well is that you also get a free trial. So go to squarespace.com to start that trial today, and then if you like what you've created, use the offer code FIRSTMAN to get 10% off your first purchase. I don't know about you, but during the lockdown and all that time we spent at home, I think in a way I became somewhat institutionalized by that. So the thought of actually going anywhere seems more anxiety inducing than it did before, especially if I'm by myself. I'm all right with other people, but all this traveling we do for landscape photography does need a little bit of something to get you out the door into that adventure mode and doing new things. And at the moment, that just seems a little bit more challenging, not just for the lack of fitness, but on previous occasions when I've been out over the last few weeks, it's been to places I know very well, and I actually chickened out of doing a wild camp by myself the other week, or last week, and yeah, just a bit annoyed with myself really. So I forced myself out today to get back on the horse, back on the bike, and doing landscape photography by myself in new places, and we'll get that momentum going again. So it's raining now, so I think I'm gonna get into the woods and do some landscape photography. Arrived in this truly remarkable location, as hopefully you've just seen. I had planned to come here just to get one image, one really good image that's going to really make this trip here worthwhile. But as I have climbed down the hill and then stumbled across it, I'm almost certain that my words, any words, are not going to do it justice, because it's just so fantastic. It feels like I've wandered into the middle of some kind of fantasy movie where there might be hobbits running around, that kind of thing. It's just so overwhelming almost, and a reward for getting out. Especially in these conditions. It's actually the perfect conditions. It's overcast, but it's still quite bright, so it's, as you can probably see behind me, it's lighting up those leaves really nicely, but then I've still got the mood in there. So in a location like this, it's fairly tricky to bring it all together, because when you're overwhelmed like I am now, you've got to sort of take a moment, breathe all that in, absorb the moment, but then start to think how we're going to bring that down into the frame with your camera. And the way I go about it, like I was talking about last week, is looking for interesting shapes and forms and light and all those kind of things. But if we take a step back from that, it's as well essentially thinking about story. Like, how can I portray the feeling I have now about this place to you through this visual art? Because you don't get the sound of the waterfall, you don't get the smell of the sort of late spring leaves and all that kind of thing. We've only got that one frame to do it. The starting point for that is the story, and by getting the right perspective. So I have so many options of where I could stand. I could get a bit closer. I could go back down the hill there. There's quite a nice log that would serve as interesting foreground. But I think I'm probably in my favourite position. And the reason for that is because this tree here, that rather large one that goes all the way up, is a very dominant feature of this place. So when you're down there, that tree is actually blocking your view of the waterfall itself. Now, the position I'm stood in right now, I can see that that tree is still a part of the frame, and I just love the roots going into that hillside. So I would definitely want that in my frame, because it's such an interesting part that's going to help give that mystical woodland feeling. But where I'm stood also is the way the actual branches of this tree are hanging over the whole sort of gorge. The place I'm stood, as you can see, is kind of the exact spot where I can see the whole of the waterfall, and it's actually really nicely framed by the branches of that tree. I think as the summer goes on, the branches may grow a bit more, but you're not going to be able to see the whole waterfall from any position unless you're directly underneath it. So I think I possibly hit a really nice time to visit here today. So with that in mind, that's what I want. I want to get the whole waterfall, I want the tree in there. Then I'm just thinking about my focal length. So how wide do I want to go? How much of this scene do I want to include in that frame to show you? There is this sort of wall, with the moss-covered wall, that's the sort of lower part of the waterfall. There's some rocks, and then there's this smaller waterfall down at the bottom here. So I'm thinking about how much of all that do I want in it. Now, it is quite nice if you crop off this smaller waterfall at the bottom here. But then what I found when I was playing around with that composition is you lose a little bit of depth. And it's the scale and the depth and these layers of waterfalls that I think are working really well for me. So I'm including that first waterfall, the smaller one here. So it's gonna be that waterfall, the tree, nice and wide. I am at, what am I at, 20 millimeters. That tree on the right hand side of the frame, giving it a little bit of breathing space towards the edge of the frame so it doesn't feel claustrophobic. And then we're leading up into the waterfall. Now, because I'm at quite a wide angle of around 20 millimeters, I've got the camera fairly straight or level, because if I start to tilt up, that tree particularly would really start to lean into the image. A tilt shift lens with the shift function would be perfect to deal with this. You could do it as a sort of vertical panorama, which would be nice. But because I've got the wide angle, I can just shoot the camera fairly straight. So the tree's going to be straight, the waterfall's going to be straight. I can see the top of the waterfall and a tiny, tiny little bit of sky, and then that lovely bright green framing at the top. So there's a whole lot going on. Then we need to think about the technicals. So I love a long exposure. I just love it. So I'm going for a 3.2 second exposure time. I'm using f16 because this foreground is quite close and there's a couple of rocks there that I want to make sure I get in focus, and that's also then giving me that slightly extra exposure time. But I'm having to bring the ISO up to about 200 because I don't want a 8-second exposure time. I think that would be too long. I've then got a circular polarizer on, which is just taking some of the sheen off the pools in front of me, so I'm not getting that sort of bright reflection off the sky. It's just all about that mood and that feeling that I'm getting while stood here. I've then dropped in a ND gradient filter. Not something I do very often, but that's just bringing that exposure of the sky down a little bit to match it. And the sort of the waterfall towards the top is very bright where it's reflecting the light. So it's just bringing that down a touch as well. It's a gradiated one, so it's blending in nicely. Just gives that mood an overall boost as well. So I think with all that said, I am ready to shoot. I'm going to focus on the rock just in front of me down here. And then I'm on the 2-second timer. Just wait for that 3 seconds to go by, and then we'll take a look. I love that. I really love that. And just a fantastic moment. I've got this whole wood pretty much to myself, and it feels very special, very rewarding. And for me, that's what it's all about. I'll show you that image now. So one of the things I've always loved about photography is the amalgamation or the marriage between art and technology. And what I love about technology generally is how these new things that come along can open up new creative opportunities. Now, to paint light using the drone gives us yet another bunch of opportunities. Essentially, all it is using these. They are called Loom Cubes, and I came across them about a year ago now. So you basically attach them to the drone, and then you can paint things from above. It just creates this ethereal, almost moonlit type feel, and it just has a completely different mood lighting it from above as it does from if you were light painting it at ground level. Yeah, I've got two of these. They sort of sit on this attachment onto the drone. So I'm going to fly the drone up, get the shutter open on the camera, and then just paint the tree with light. It sounds straightforward, but I need to wait for it to get dark. Right, here we go then. I've already got the camera pre-focused on the tree from when it was still light. I can also use those lights underneath the tree to help me with that. It's very straightforward, really, in terms of the settings. So I am at f11 because I want everything to be sharp still, and hopefully I can extend the shutter time to make sure I get the right exposure with that. I'm just keeping it at ISO 100 to keep the noise down, and then 15 seconds to start with. Then I'm just going to fly the drone up, get it set so it's going to circle around the tree out of the frame, then fire away. Hopefully then the light will be right on the tree, it'll look really nice, and it's just going to give you that kind of ethereal moonlit feel to the image. Right, I'm just going to turn off the lights under the tree because we don't want them in there. Right, and turn the drone on. Now that the drone lights are on.
Take off.
And then take off. Now, with the drone,
Please check it on the map.
I'm going to start recording. Uses batteries much quicker because the lights are actually quite heavy. So I don't have too long here. Let's fly it across now, lighten that tree up really nicely. Right, then we go to point of interest. Then you have to move it back a bit. It seems to be 6 meters is the minimum. So let's go for that. And then it just starts going round. So I want to speed it up to go to about 18 seconds. Let's bring it down a bit. So it lights the tree up. It's really, really tricky. I'm having to do it manually, but if I get too low, I'm seeing a lot of the light in the camera. So let's just try again. Now there we go. That was so difficult. It was really, really difficult. Trying to get the drone to fly right, trying to light the tree smoothly, trying to get the shot, trying to talk to the camera at the same time. Don't think it went too well because I was looking at the camera and it was just looking so blurry and weird, and I thought it was because I was getting lens flare from the lights because I was exposing for about 30 seconds in the end. I've landed the drone because I've run out of battery now, and I went to just take one last image and realised because it's been so warm, now it's got cold, everything's got so damp, including the front of the lens, which is covered in a kind of layer of water essentially. So yeah, I think that's completely mucked the shot up. However, maybe it's going to give it that even more ethereal feel. I won't know until I get it back into post-processing. Whoa, a lot of practice to go, and yeah, not a lot of practice to do. A lot of practice.
Was in an industrial heartland, in the shadow of the steelworks and working class, but near the countryside, so often being able to just get out into the countryside as often as possible really was the cornerstone of my childhood, and that really just continued into adulthood. And I really wanted to be a painter. I did a lot of watercolour paintings, and I sort of fell into videography and teaching documentary filmmaking and doing stuff that was creative but slightly outside the zone that I thought I'd be in. And then I picked up a camera, the stills camera, when I was 25, and that really started to work out. I just really enjoyed taking photos of anything and everything. And I felt like what I was missing that I gave up when I got a D in A-level art was then replaced by this photography, and almost naturally I just liked being outside. Started taking photos because I really enjoyed taking photos, and it fulfilled some sense of creativity in me that had been really missing.
One of the things that particularly interests me is, and I think a lot of people find difficult, is when you get into a landscape, what is your approach? Like, what do you look for? How do you start to take everything around us and make it into a 2D image?
It depends on the landscape. I think I try not to have a huge amount of expectation. If there's a certain amount of conditions that are happening and the weather's being interesting, then it's sometimes hard to avoid those expectations of what I might want to get. But I think just kind of approaching it and keeping my eyes open for compositions. I think with photography, the more you do it, the more you see. So inevitably, the more you look at something, the more you start to piece it together, or I do anyway. When I look at a scene, I start piecing it together and think, oh, this could work, this could work. But I think I try and take the approach of just enjoying being in the landscape, and then if a composition jumps out at me, then that's kind of a cherry on top. I think with obvious scenes, like we're in the Lake District right now, there are places that I know really well. And I think going back to places again and again can be a really good way. Like where we are today, it's the weather isn't exactly amazing, but I've taken a lot of phone shots of little scenes that have jumped out of me, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe in a couple of weeks, or maybe with the right light, that could start to look really good. So, yeah.
One thing you said earlier as we were walking up here, which kind of struck a chord with me, because I feel like I'm the same, is that you said you were quite an emotional photographer.
I think I'm quite an emotional human, so inevitably that leaks into what I do creatively. It's not that I don't know how to use my camera. I obviously do know how to use my camera, and I am technically minded. It's just I tend to feel the attachment to the image, the attachment to the landscape, and use that as an intuitive basis for the photo itself. But I find the photos that resonate with me on a personal level have a backstory. They have a moment in time that's encapsulated in that one image itself that transcends the image in a way. So I think part of me is in those images just a little bit more. That's probably the way it comes through, whether it's through how I've interpreted it in an edit or how excited I was that this was happening in front of me. Those are the moments that mean something, and I think the work that I create from those moments, to me on a personal level, just elevates it. And interestingly enough, those tend to be the pieces of work that other people connect to a little better.
I was just saying that I love your work from Lewis.
Yes.
Lewis.
Yeah, Lewis and Harris. I think that part of the world is really special to me. I got married up there. The first time I went there was just something about the way it gets into your soul. And there are a couple of mornings up there that I can think of, one with a particular rainbow where unexpectedly there was just everything going on at once. And yeah, I think those images I'm connected to in a way that is more than just an image on a sensor. Landscape photography is a language. It's a universal language. It's a way of us connecting with nature, and it's a way of us helping others connect with nature and connect with each other, with places that mean something to you, that you have the privilege of photographing. There's almost a responsibility there to help bring that connection and bring that beauty to others. I just love it. I just love getting outside. I love it. Like where we are now, the light's changing and it's everything's illuminated, and you've got all of these awesome colours coming through suddenly, and that's, yeah, it's really good. It's good for the soul, it's good for my heart, it's good for my mental health, and now it's my job. And I don't quite know how that happened, but I'm quite happy it did.
Right, so I am set up for a shot now, and I've settled down a little bit, although I'm still feeling a tad frustrated, because if you look over there, the cloud and the light is just really interesting, but I just can't figure out anything to do in the foreground. So rather than fumble around and miss what I think is going to be a really colourful sunset, all I've done is, like I say, disappointingly, just kept it really, really simple again. And as the tide has gone out, it's revealed this rock formation here behind me. I really like this one here. If I could get a bit closer to that as the tide went out a bit further, it would be even better, but I don't think I'm going to manage it. I might have a little go, but I'm just, like I say, keeping it really, really simple at the moment. Then using this little pool in front of the camera to hopefully capture a little bit of the reflection of the colour in the sky, because the seaweed's really dark and I don't particularly love it. So I've raised the camera up a little bit, so this bottom bit of seaweed is out below the frame, and then I've included the rock in this formation here, and then pretty much I'm relying on the sky bursting into colour. But it was only going to work if that colour is really visible. So again, I have actually I don't have the polarizer on this time because I want the reflections this time. I am, however, going to use the 6-stop filter again, so just slide that in. I've got it a little bit lower because, like I say, I want to be able to point the camera up to get all the colour in the sky. Then I'm going to roll the shutter speed probably around 6 seconds, and there's actually some really lovely water coming through as well, and creating some swirls in this little pool in front of me. So I'm going to bracket that as well, because like I say, the seaweed's really dark, so I'm having to do a slightly longer exposure for that one. I'm at f11, should be okay because this bit of seaweed here is not in the frame. I've then boosted it to ISO 320. I might boost that a bit more to 400 because I don't want the exposure to be too long because it'll start to get a little bit silly, I think. So yeah, we'll just wait. I might play around with settings, take a few more images. Oh, but it's just such a beautiful evening. And look at the colour in the sky now. It's all around me, in fact. Just looking absolutely beautiful. I'm going to take a minute to pause because I've been trying hard with this video today. I've been trying hard with the photographs. It's not all gone according to plan, and these things never do. But I like to get a shot in the bag, so I try to keep it simple. I hope I'm coming away with 3 images today. I know I've not shown you all 3, but yeah, I'm just going to take a few deep breaths now and just soak in this moment. Sometimes when you're struggling to get your photographs, to get your compositions, you have to remind yourself to stop and enjoy it and breathe it all in and take those moments. Living the present, like I was talking about the other week, because these are the moments that count. These are the moments that boost the well-being. What more could I ask for than this right now? It's just fantastic. I've made it, and the feeling I'm experiencing right now is just fantastic. I've got this whole hill to myself and this tree and this beautiful dry stone wall forming my composition. If you can see the tree behind me, there's not as much snow on it as some of the trees down back in the woods, but it's still enough. It's still got some beautiful detail. It's stuck to the trunk on the right hand side of the tree, and I've now got a really beautiful soft light coming from over there. We're still in golden hour in the morning, and it's just fantastic. So just very quickly before I talk it through, I'm going to capture another shot. There's also a little pheasant sitting on the wall. You may hear him or her call in a minute, but that's captured in the image as well. This Canon R5 has a 50 megapixel sensor, so it's still going to capture loads of detail. There's not a breath of wind, so those branches are perfectly still. Did you hear that? So it's just so exciting. And normally, when I come to this location, I would go through that gap in the wall, but over on the left-hand side of the frame, next to the wall, there's just blades of grass coming through, and the snow is pristine. So I did not want to walk on that, and as a result, I've had to trek right across this, which was hard going. Very hard going, but the reward feels very special. The reason I have the tripod high up on the neck here is because hear those pheasants. I love the wall, and that's forming leading line coming in from the bottom left hand side of the screen, but I'm high up because that's coming from the bottom, and then I want to see the hills in the distance, and if I go down too low there, like you can see, the hills sort of disappear. So I've got the tree sort of sitting on the rule of thirds on the top right hand corner rule of thirds. The only problem with the composition is this bottom right hand side of the image, because it isn't the best looking part of the image, and it's not necessarily even forming a line from the bottom right. So I think what I'll do in post-processing is reduce the luminance maybe down in that part of the image. I'm not sure, because it may work as a really beautiful bright image. It's just fantastic though. So settings, I'm at f11 and I'm focusing on the tree, keeping it really simple. I'm at ISO 100. I'm at 1/40th of a second as the sun pokes through even more and lights up those trees. And that, I think, could be the one. There's still some colour in the sky as well. Some lovely yellows. Just a fantastic moment that I feel exceptionally grateful for. I'm such an idiot. I just flew the drone into the tree, as you can see here. I have thankfully got it back, but what an absolute calamity. If you're worried about the tree, don't be. That's absolutely fine, but my drone has pretty much got every rotor blade broken. And I knew the tree was in the way, I knew it. And then rather than stopping the drone, which is the sensible thing to do, I tried to raise it up over the tree because I thought it would make a cool shot. And then it got stuck. And I was throwing snowballs at it, which didn't work, other than showering the drone with snow. I then took the ball head off my tripod and threw that. I gave the tree a little shake, it didn't fall out, and then I threw this again, and then that disappeared into the snow, which I just did not think about at all, so I lost that for a minute. I then thought, well, sod it, I'm just gonna keep trying, so eventually I launched my whole tripod up at the drone because it was just dangling on a little branch at the edge. Thankfully I didn't miss that time, and it came down with the tripod, and then after probably about 20 minutes of searching, I finally found the tripod head. So it's kind of a mixture of relief, feeling like an idiot, and I'm also sorry that I didn't film more of it, but I thought I would tell you about it anyway because, these videos, they do not come easy. I really need some help. Right, well, I'm in position for another shot, and as you can see, the snow has really started to go now, and I'm just much more excited than I was in that last shot. And I've got the Canon R5 set up with the 70 to 200 2.8 lens on there, and wow, what a lens. Why is my screen stopped working now? There we go. There's a bit of water on the eyepiece sensor, so it switched the screen off. But oh, what a scene this is. I've got the snow coming in from top right of the frame to bottom left, and it just looks fantastic. The trick is going to be to get the shutter speed right, to get the snow looking how I want it to look. Do I want it to be frozen in the scene? Do I want some movement in the snow? I'm not sure. So at the moment I've got it boosted to ISO 500 to give me that range with the shutter speed. I'm at f6.3, I'm going to go to f8. I'm at 1/40th of a second at the moment, so I'm going to fire that off. Have a look at that. That's too bright, so I'm going to turn that ISO down. So it's just a case of playing around with that exposure triangle, because this snow, oh my goodness, just look at it. It's so beautiful. And I want to capture it with these beautiful silver birch trees. And as it starts to gather on the heather here, it looks tremendous through the viewfinder. I've got to say, this is the best viewfinder I've ever used on a mirrorless camera. As long as you've got the exposure right, it's difficult to tell that you're even looking through an EVF. It's that good. So let's have a look at that last shot. It's full of intrigue. It's full of intrigue, but it just doesn't quite look like it does through the EVF. I think what I'm gonna have to do is just keep firing until I get the snowflakes looking right. And it's just starting to look better and better and better. Oh wow, look at it over there. I don't know what to do. Let's just spin around. Let's do this real time. This is what my videos are like sometimes. I'm gonna have to hold you again while I compose. Oh, now that is a shot. Now that is a shot. Let me give you a wipe because you're starting to get pretty wet. Right, I want higher ISO this time. Higher f-stop rather. Let's just fire that and see what it does. It's gonna be a bit dark, I think. Yep, let's up the ISO then. Actually, let's bring that down to 5.6. It's such a mess around with the settings. It's just all, the problem I'm having is the snowflakes that are falling directly in front of me are blocking the image almost. Tell you what I could do is try and block it with my body. So let's... That is fun. That is fun. The thing that is interesting about this moment, although it's exciting, it's always in these minutes that when things are happening fast, you've got to know your gear. And in fact, I've only been using this camera for a couple of weeks, but it feels really natural. It feels easy. It may be because it's Canon still, but everything's right there, and all the controls are easy to handle in the field like this, in this magnificent moment. So just look at it. I'm choking on a piece of snow. Oh. Anyway,